The crimson sunset painted the Wyoming Territory sky as Madeline Elwood drove her wagon alone toward Twin Rivers, a town that had seen better days before the silver mine dried up. The year was 1878, and at 22, Madeline had already buried both parents and was hauling everything she owned to start fresh. Her hands were calloused from years of working her family's failing farm, her spirit unbowed despite the whispers that followed her from her hometown that she was too headstrong, too capable, too much of everything a proper woman shouldn't be. The wagon wheel caught in a deep rut, jolting her forward. Madeline climbed down, assessing the damage with practiced eyes. The axle hadn't broken, but the wheel was mired deep in mud. She rolled up her sleeves, revealing arms toned from years of farm labor, and set her shoulder against the wagon bed. "That's quite a predicament you've got yourself in, madam," called a deep voice. Madeline straightened, pushing back a strand of auburn hair that had escaped her practical braid. A tall man sat atop a chestnut stallion, watching her with curious blue eyes. His face was weathered beneath his wide-brimmed hat, and a deputy's badge glinted on his vest. "Nothing I can't handle," she replied, resuming her position. The man dismounted in one fluid motion. "Name's Rhys Xavier, deputy of Twin Rivers." He approached, keeping a respectful distance. "Might I offer some assistance?" "I was managing just fine before you arrived, Deputy Xavier," Madeline said, pushing against the wagon with renewed determination. Rhys raised an eyebrow, amusement playing on his lips. "I don't doubt it, miss. Elwood, Madeline Elwood." "Well, Miss Elwood, I'm not questioning your capabilities, just offering a second set of hands. Even the strongest person appreciates help now and then." Something in his tone, the lack of condescension she was so accustomed to, made Madeline pause. She studied him for a moment before giving a curt nod. Together, they positioned themselves against the wagon. On Madeline's count, they pushed in unison, muscles straining until the wheel finally lurched free. "You're stronger than you look," Rhys remarked, dusting off his hands. "And you look exactly as strong as you are," she replied, unable to keep a small smile from her lips. "Where you headed?" he asked, helping her back onto the wagon seat without being asked. "Twin Rivers. I've purchased the old mercantile." Surprise flashed across his face. "Harding's place, that's been shut up for months." "Not anymore," Madeline said simply. "I've got goods, supplies, and determination enough to make it work." "Well then," Rhys said, mounting his horse, "allow me to be your escort into town. Folks should know you're coming." As they traveled the remaining miles, Madeline found herself sharing more than she intended about her parents' deaths, the farm she'd sold, her plans for the mercantile. Rhys listened, offering stories of his own about a town struggling since the mine closed and his hopes of becoming sheriff someday. "Most folks left when the silver ran out," he explained. "Those who stayed are stubborn as mules." "Then I'll fit right in," Madeline said with more confidence than she felt. Twin Rivers appeared on the horizon, a collection of wooden buildings lining a wide main street, the two tributaries that gave the town its name glistening in the distance. Madeline straightened her spine as they approached, aware of curious eyes peering from windows and doorways. Rhys led her to a two-story building with a faded sign, "Harding's Mercantile." It was dusty and neglected, but Madeline could see its potential. "Home, sweet home," she murmured. "Need help unloading," Rhys offered. "I can manage." "I don't doubt it, Miss Elwood," he said with that same respect in his voice, "but I'm offering anyway." Madeline found herself accepting, and together they carried her trunks and crates inside. The interior was dim and cobwebbed but spacious. "Thank you, Deputy Xavier," she said when they finished. "Rhys," he corrected, "and I'll check in tomorrow, see how you're settling." True to his word, Rhys appeared the next morning, and the next. Sometimes with information about the town, sometimes with a spare tool, sometimes just to ask how she was managing. Madeline, who had prepared herself for resistance and ridicule, found herself warming to his quiet acceptance. The townspeople were another matter. The women watched with suspicious eyes as Madeline single-handedly moved heavy shelving and scrubbed floors. The men chuckled when she announced she'd be handling all aspects of the business herself. A woman running a mercantile, without a husband. Mrs. Dunfield, the baker's wife, sniffed during Madeline's first week. It simply isn't proper. Neither is a town without essential supplies, Madeline replied evenly. She worked from dawn until dusk, restocking shelves, cleaning, repairing what needed fixing. When her first shipment of goods arrived ordered months in advance with the last of her inheritance, she unloaded the heavy crates herself, ignoring the stares of passers-by. One evening, as she struggled with a particularly unwieldy crate of tinned goods, a group of ranch hands from the Circle B stopped to watch. "Ain't right, a lady doing man's work," one called out. "Maybe she ain't much of a lady," another suggested with a smirk. Madeline ignored them, continuing her work until a familiar voice cut through their laughter. "That's enough, gentlemen," Rhys said, his tone pleasant but with an edge of steel. "Just having some fun, deputy," the first cowboy protested. "Find it elsewhere," Rhys replied, stepping closer to Madeline. "Need a hand with that crate, Miss Elwood?" "I've got it," she said, finally maneuvering it inside. Only when the door closed behind her did she allow her shoulders to slump briefly. It was what she'd expected, but expectation didn't lessen the sting. A knock sounded and Rhys entered without waiting for her response. "Don't let them bother you." "I don't," she lied. "They're just not used to a woman like you," he continued, leaning against the counter she'd polished to a high shine. "Independent, capable, strong," Madeline added with a hint of bitterness. "Yes," Rhys agreed, but there was admiration in his eyes. "Your strength is remarkable." "Most men find it threatening." "Most men are fools," he replied simply. The mercantile officially opened 2 weeks after Madeline's arrival. Business was slow at first, the women coming in groups as if for protection, the men gruff and to the point. But Madeline's fair prices and quality goods began to win them over, as did her willingness to order special items from the East. One afternoon, as summer heat baked the streets to dust, Rhys entered the store just as Madeline was helping young Tommy Wells reach a jar of candy on a high shelf. "Thank you, Miss Elwood," Tommy exclaimed, clutching his purchase. "You're most welcome, Tommy," she smiled, ruffling his hair. Rhys watched the exchange with a warm expression. "You're good with children." "Children don't judge," Madeline replied. "They don't care if I can lift a crate or ride astride or run a business alone. Speaking of which," Rhys said, lowering his voice, "there's been talk." Madeline stiffened. "There's always talk. The town council is concerned about a single woman running such an essential business. They're suggesting you need a male business partner." Anger flashed through Madeline. "I've done everything by myself for weeks. The store is successful, the accounts are in order, I know," Rhys interrupted gently. "I've told them as much. And they've invited you to the council meeting tomorrow evening." His expression softened. "I'll be there. Not that you need defending, but sometimes it helps to have an ally." The council meeting was held in the back room of the Silver Dollar Saloon. 5 stern-faced men sat at a long table. Mayor Thompson, a former mine owner, Herbert Watson, who owned the livery stable, Pastor Miller, Dr. Albright, and Samuel Brown, proprietor of the saloon. Madeline entered with her head high, wearing her best dress, a practical navy blue with minimal embellishments. Rhys stood against the far wall, his presence a silent comfort. "Miss Elwood," Mayor Thompson began, "we've asked you here to discuss some concerns about your situation." For the next 20 minutes, Madeline listened to their objections: her youth, her gender, her lack of experience in business, the impropriety of her independence. She remained composed, meeting each accusation with facts about the mercantile's success. "Gentlemen," she finally said, "I understand your concerns, but I've proven myself capable. The store is profitable, the townspeople are satisfied with the service, and I have no need of a business partner." "It simply isn't natural," Pastor Miller insisted. "A woman needs protection, guidance." "Miss Elwood doesn't strike me as needing protection," Rhys spoke up from his corner. "In fact, I'd say her strength is an asset to this community." Mayor Thompson frowned. "Deputy Xavier, this isn't. I've watched Miss Elwood rebuild that mercantile single-handedly," Rhys continued, stepping forward. "I've seen her lift crates heavier than some of you could manage. I've seen her handle difficult customers with grace and keep cleaner books than the bank. If you force a business partner on her, you'll lose the best thing that's happened to Twin Rivers since the mine closed." A stunned silence followed his words. "Miss Elwood was called too strong back in her hometown," Rhys continued quietly. "But here, in a place fighting to survive, her strength is exactly what we need." Madeline stared at him, a warmth spreading through her chest that had nothing to do with the stuffy room. Mayor Thompson cleared his throat. "Well, I suppose we could reconsider, given the circumstances." The council adjourned with no decision made a victory of sorts. As Madeline left the saloon, Rhys fell into step beside her. "Thank you," she said simply. "I only spoke the truth." They walked in companionable silence through the quiet streets. The summer night was heavy with the scent of sage and distant rain. "How did you know?" Madeline asked suddenly. "About what they called me back home," Rhys smiled. "You mentioned it that first day, and I've heard the whispers when you lift something they think you shouldn't be able to." "It wasn't always a criticism, you know," Madeline said softly. "My father was proud of it. 'My Maddie's stronger than any boy,' he used to say. It was only after he died that I realized most people didn't see it as a virtue." They stopped in front of the mercantile, moonlight casting long shadows across the boardwalk. "Your father was right to be proud," Rhys said. "Your strength is remarkable, but it's not just physical strength I admire. It's your courage, your determination." Madeline felt her cheeks warm. "Deputy Xavier, Rhys," he corrected gently. "And I mean it, Madeline. Your strength is my pride, even if I have no right to claim it." Something shifted between them in that moment, a recognition, perhaps, of feelings that had been growing since that first day on the road. But before Madeline could respond, a shout broke the night's stillness. "Fire! Fire at the livery!" The peaceful moment shattered as they both turned toward the orange glow lighting the eastern end of town. Without hesitation, they ran toward the danger, joining the chaotic scramble of townspeople forming a bucket brigade from the nearest river. The livery stable was already engulfed, flames licking hungrily at the dry wood. Horses screamed in terror inside. "The animals," Madeline gasped. Herbert Watson was frantically trying to open the main doors, coughing in the thick smoke. Rhys rushed to help him, and together they forced the heavy doors wide. "The roof's going to collapse." Someone shouted. Watson emerged, leading 2 horses. "There are 6 more inside," he cried. Rhys plunged back into the burning building without hesitation. Madeline grabbed a horse blanket, soaked it in a water trough, and wrapped it around herself before following him. The heat inside was suffocating, the smoke blinding. She could make out Rhys's silhouette as he struggled to calm a panicked stallion. "Take him," he shouted when he saw her. "I'll get the others." Madeline led the frightened animal out, handed him off to a waiting ranch hand, and immediately returned. Together, she and Rhys worked to free the remaining horses, leading them through the flames to safety. As they guided the last horse out, a terrible cracking sound split the air. Madeline looked up to see a burning beam breaking free directly above Rhys. "Look out." She screamed, launching herself forward with all her strength. She collided with him, sending them both tumbling through the doorway just as the beam crashed down where he had stood. They landed hard on the dirt outside, Madeline atop Rhys, both coughing and gasping for clean air. For a moment, they simply stared at each other, faces inches apart, the realization of how close they'd come to disaster passing between them. "You saved my life," Rhys finally managed. "You'd have done the same," Madeline replied, suddenly conscious of their position. She moved to roll away, but Rhys caught her hand. "Stay," he said softly, "just for a moment." They might have remained there longer if not for the commotion around them. "Doctor." Albright insisted on examining them both for injuries, and the bucket brigade still fought to contain the fire. Now a lost cause for the livery but focused on preventing it from spreading. By dawn, the stable was a smoldering ruin, but no lives had been lost, human or animal. The town gathered in the street, exhausted and soot-stained. "Miss Elwood," Herbert Watson approached, his voice rough from smoke. "I owe you a debt I can't repay. You and the deputy saved my livelihood." Word of Madeline's bravery spread quickly through the assembled townspeople. The same men who had scoffed at her independence now looked at her with newfound respect. The women who had whispered behind their hands now offered smiles and thanks. Mayor Thompson cleared his throat. "I believe, Miss Elwood, that the council's concerns have been thoroughly addressed by your actions tonight. Twin Rivers is fortunate to have you." Madeline accepted his words with a gracious nod, too tired to feel triumphant. As the crowd dispersed, Rhys remained at her side, steady and protective. "You should rest," he told her quietly. "So should you," she countered. "You inhaled more smoke than I did." "Let me walk you home at least." At the mercantile, Madeline hesitated at the door. "Would you like to come in? I could make coffee." Rhys nodded, following her inside. They moved in companionable silence, Madeline lighting the stove, Rhys finding cups in the cupboard as if he belonged there. When the coffee was ready, they sat at the small table in Madeline's living quarters behind the store. "I've never met anyone like you," Rhys said after a long moment. "Because I'm too strong," Madeline asked with a tired smile. "Because you're exactly strong enough." He reached across the table, his hand covering hers. "Strong enough to save lives, strong enough to change minds, strong enough to make a hardened deputy fall in love with you." Madeline's breath caught. "Rhys, I know it's sudden," he continued. "Or perhaps it isn't. Perhaps I've been falling since that first day on the road, but watching you run into that fire tonight, seeing your courage, I couldn't wait another day to tell you." Madeline turned her hand beneath his, their fingers intertwining. "I've spent my whole life being told I'm too much of everything a woman shouldn't be," she said softly. "Too independent, too outspoken, too strong. I never thought I'd find someone who saw those things as virtues rather than flaws." "They're not just virtues," Rhys replied, his voice low and earnest. "They're why I love you." He rose from his chair, still holding her hand, and knelt beside her. "Madeline Elwood, I don't have much to offer: a deputy's salary, a small house at the edge of town, a life that sometimes puts me in danger. But I promise you this, I will never ask you to be less than you are. Your strength will always be my pride." Tears welled in Madeline's eyes. "No one has ever wanted me exactly as I am." "I do," he said simply. "If you'll have me." Her answer came not in words but in action, leaning forward to press her lips to his in a kiss that held both tenderness and the promise of passion. When they finally parted, both were smiling. "Is that a yes?" Rhys asked, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Yes," Madeline laughed. "Though I should warn you, I intend to keep running the mercantile." "I'd expect nothing less," he replied, rising to pull her into his arms. "Partners in all things, partners," she agreed. The weeks that followed saw a transformation in Twin Rivers' attitude toward Madeline. The fire had proven her worth beyond doubt, and as summer gave way to autumn, she found herself not just tolerated but respected by the community that had once viewed her with suspicion. Herbert Watson rebuilt his livery with help from the entire town, including Madeline, who organized supplies and worked alongside the men raising the new barn. No one commented on her strength anymore, at least not critically. Rhys and Madeline's courtship progressed with the steady certainty of two people who recognized in each other exactly what they needed. He respected her independence, never interfering with the mercantile but always offering help when asked. She supported his ambitions for advancement in law enforcement, listening to his concerns about keeping the peace in a territory still wild in many ways. They were married on a crisp October day, with the aspen trees blazing gold against the blue Wyoming sky. Pastor Miller, who had once been among her strongest critics, performed the ceremony with genuine warmth. The entire town turned out for the celebration, transforming Main Street into a festival of food, music, and dancing. "Mrs. Xavier," Rhys murmured as they shared their first dance as husband and wife. I'll still be using Elwood for business, Madeline reminded him with a smile. I wouldn't have it any other way, he assured her, spinning her beneath the lantern light. Later that evening, as the celebration continued around them, Mayor Thompson approached with an official-looking document. Deputy Xavier, Miss Elwood, or should I say Mrs. Xavier, he corrected himself. I have an announcement. The council has voted unanimously to offer you the position of sheriff, Rhys. Our town is growing again, thanks in no small part to the mercantile bringing in new business. We need leadership we can trust. Rhys looked stunned. I'm honored, sir. And as for you, Miss Elwood, the mayor continued, the council would like to appoint you to fill the vacant seat left by Dr. Albright's departure next month. We believe your business acumen and strength of character would be valuable additions. Now it was Madeline's turn to be surprised. Me, on the town council, if you're willing, Mayor Thompson confirmed. Times are changing and Twin Rivers must change with them. That night, in the small house that was now their shared home, Madeline and Rhys marveled at how much had changed in just a few months. Sheriff Xavier, Madeline teased, nestled against his side in their bed. Councilwoman Elwood Xavier, he returned, pressing a kiss to her temple. Do you think they would have offered me the position if the fire hadn't happened? She wondered. Eventually, Rhys said thoughtfully. Your worth would have become apparent one way or another. The fire just sped things along. Madeline traced the line of his jaw with gentle fingers. I never imagined finding a place where I truly belonged. You belong wherever you choose to be, he told her. But I'm grateful you chose to be here with me. As winter settled over Twin Rivers, bringing snowdrifts and quiet evenings by the fire, Madeline and Rhys settled into married life with the same determination they brought to everything. The mercantile flourished under Madeline's continued management, while Rhys took to his new role as sheriff with a natural authority tempered by fairness. Their partnership in business, in town affairs, in their home, became a model for others. Young girls who once would have been discouraged from showing too much spirit now had someone to look up to. Boys learned that respecting a woman's strength didn't diminish their own. Spring brought new beginnings, including the news that Madeline was expecting their first child. The town celebrated alongside them, the same community that had once questioned her suitability, now eagerly anticipating the arrival of the sheriff and councilwoman's baby. You're worried, Rhys observed one evening, finding Madeline standing by the window, her hand resting on her growing belly. Not worried, she corrected. Just thinking. My mother lost much of her independence when she had children. It was expected she devoted herself entirely to family. Rhys came to stand behind her, his arms encircling her waist. What do you expect? I don't know, she admitted. I want to be a good mother, but I don't want to lose myself either. Then don't, he said simply. Our child will have the benefit of two parents who respect each other's strengths. Who better to teach a daughter to be strong or a son to value strength in others? Madeline leaned back against him. You make it sound so easy. Not easy, Rhys chuckled. Nothing worthwhile ever is, but possible. We'll figure it out together. When summer returned to Twin Rivers, it brought with it a healthy baby girl with Rhys's blue eyes and Madeline's determined chin. They named her Clara, after Madeline's mother, and from her earliest days she was as much a fixture at the mercantile as her parents. Townspeople grew accustomed to the sight of Sheriff Xavier walking his rounds with his daughter in his arms, or Councilwoman Elwood nursing the baby between meetings. If anyone disapproved, they kept it to themselves. Twin Rivers had learned the value of Madeline's unconventional strength. On Clara's first birthday, as family and friends gathered to celebrate, Madeline found a moment alone with Rhys behind the mercantile, watching the sunset paint the sky in the same colors that had greeted her arrival 2 years earlier. Any regrets? Rhys asked, his arm around her waist. Madeline shook her head. Not one, only that I didn't find you sooner, he smiled. Though perhaps we both needed to become who we are before we could find each other. "And who am I?" Madeline asked, curious about how he saw her now. "You're the woman who saved a town that didn't know it needed saving," Rhys said. "You're a businesswoman, a councilwoman, a mother, a wife. You're the strongest person I know inside and out." He pressed a kiss to her forehead, "And your strength is still my greatest pride." Madeline leaned into him, content in the knowledge that she had found not just a home, but a place where her strength was valued rather than feared. In Rhys, she had found not just a partner but a champion who took pride in the very qualities others had criticized. In Clara, she was nurturing the next generation of strong women who would forge their own paths. "We should get back to the party," she said after a long moment. "In a minute," Rhys replied, turning her in his arms. "First, I want to kiss my wife." As their lips met in the fading light, Madeline reflected that perhaps this was the greatest strength of all, the courage to love and be loved, exactly as you are.